Well, Ukraine will receive a critical boost to its air defences after US Secretary of State Antony Blinken confirmed the first Ukrainian F-16 fighters will be donated by the Dutch and Danish governments. Mark Cancian is a former US Marine colonel and senior advisor at Washington Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mark, welcome. Good to see you. Just how significant is this?
Well, it will add to Ukrainian military capabilities. There's no question that Ukrainian air defenses particularly have been weak. The problem is that this is just the first step in building air power. Air power is an entire system. It's not just a couple of aircraft. It's going to take a long time, and it's not going to be a game changer. Many people hope that there will be some weapon we can give the Ukrainians, now F-16s, that will change the course of the war. It's not going to change the course of the war, although it will help.
You make it almost sound like a token gesture. I mean, just how large of a fleet of F-16 fighter jets does Ukraine realistically need then?
Well, many air power advocates have talked about a number around 200. So far, countries have pledged 60, and maybe a dozen are headed there in the near term. The challenges are that 200 would be about 80% larger than their pre-war inventory, and this is part of an entire system. Of course, there are pilots, there are maintainers, there are support aircraft like search and rescue, like electronic warfare, there are bases, there are weapons, there's command and control, there are radars. There's a whole air power network that has to be built. It's not just a question of sending airplanes.
And just how difficult is it then to deliver the required number of warplanes?
Well, the good news is that many NATO countries are getting rid of their older F-16s and moving to other aircraft, for example, the F-35, so that there are F-16s available to move to Ukraine. But there are a couple of challenges. The first is that there are about a dozen different variants of the F-16. Every country's F-16 is different in some small way, so that has to be either harmonized or you have to have different logistics. F-16s coming from the United States have technology transfer restrictions, so very often you have to take out some systems and put in different systems. And finally, there's a cost question. An F-16 costs about $15,000 per flight hour, and to replace one costs about $100 million. Now, the Ukrainians will be getting old ones, but if a country gives the Ukrainians an old F-16 and wants to buy a replacement, that's about $100 million.
As you say, it's not just about the hardware, is it? It's about the human investment. I mean, what are the challenges of training pilots to operate them once they've been supplied? Well,
here again, there's good news and some challenges. The good news is that Ukraine has many good pilots who can enter the system with already a lot of skills, but there are a couple of challenges. One is that just aren't that many school seats for F-16 pilots. There are several schools that provide this training, and they're well developed, but the system was sized for peacetime operations, not for wartime surge. There's a challenge with English proficiency because the instruction is in English, but there are two additional challenges. One is that the way that the U.S. and NATO use their airplanes is different from the Soviets, the Russians, the Ukrainians. That is, pilots have much more discretion, whereas under the Ukrainian and previous Soviet system, they were much more restricted. So you have to teach them a different way of applying air power. And then finally, I think there's a different attitude towards risk. The Ukrainians are willing to take more risk. The U.S. and NATO are inclined to be a little more cautious. I mean, their feeling is if we're going to give this airplane to the Ukrainians, we want to make sure that they're thoroughly trained.
Mark, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming back on the programme. Mark Cancian, Senior Advisor at Washington Center for Strategic and International Studies.